My name is Gabriel Aquiles, and today I would like to talk a little bit about my history of my faith, the history of my faith, in simple words, simple terms. So, as you can probably already tell, I was born and raised in a fam- in a family that practices Roman Catholicism most of the time. Not truly devout, but has maintained a balance between Roman Catholicism and other aspects of real life. And you know what? I'm not really I don't really want my main my main goal in life is not to become a priest, nor deacon, nor bishop, nor pope or anything. All I want to do with my Catholic faith is not only to practice it, but also take part in some community service events, help people in need that I will get into later. So both my father and my mother has practiced Catholicism, as well as the rest of my family. Some, I have some, I have some friends that there's. I also have a few friends that also practice Catholicism. One of them, one of, one of my friends are devout Catholics, and one of my other friends are casual Catholics. They practice Catholicism, but they don't practice it in every single second. And I think that's kind of cool. But the problem is I didn't really understand much of my faith. I didn't even know who Jesus was. I didn't even know anything about God, Mary, the Virgin Mary, or anything historical historically related to the Bible itself when I was younger. Because since I'm autistic, I couldn't really understand I couldn't really understand what I read, what I say. The part the part where I have to do the math, I was okay with. But the reading part I was not too good with at the time. It got so bad to the point where I had to be sent to summer school back back in between 3rd and 4th grade. I almost got held, as a matter of fact, but it was worth it. I improved a little bit better in reading as time went by. I still had bad grades, but they weren't as bad to the point in which I failed. And every grade I just keep getting better with reading. And that's the payoff of summer school, in my opinion. But that has nothing to do with my but that has nothing to do with my Catholic faith. The part about my grades. I didn't I didn't even know why I went to church in the first place when I was younger. During the times in which I was a toddler, I didn't even know how important Catholicism was in my life. Basically, in summary, I remember my grandmother having been a devout Catholic throughout her life when she was still alive. In my room, there is a I have this very large rosary that I think my grandmother made. There's also a black and white painting of Jesus in that room too. I think it was also made by my grandmother or purchased by my grandmother too, during the times, of course, when she was still alive. thing is, back in like, I think back in late 2007 or early 2008, I can't quite remember, was the time in which I got baptized. You know, the thing with baptism, at least where I live, bap- in order for me to get baptized, my parents had to take a course, on how to prepare for baptism. And in summary, baptism is me basically being dunked in holy water by the priest, by either the priest or bishop, or literally anyone in case of an emergency. I baptize you in the name of God. That's how baptism is, how it was for me. Also after baptism, I remember my my parents would celebrate my baptism where I went to one of my cousins, where I went to uncles one of my uncles and aunts' homes, where I of course celebrated my baptism. Some of my other infant relatives were there too, also celebrating my baptism. That's pretty much about it. Even at that time, I didn't understand why I got baptized until I finally found out about the pictures that my parents took of me over 14 years later, heck, even 15 years later. Also, I remember vividly my grandmother taking me to church. I think at that time almost every Sunday to church. I have to say my grandmother enjoyed it. Now the next thing about my history in terms of my Catholic faith is First Communion. Still at that time, and still didn't understand what my faith was. That was back in 4th grade, throughout fall 2015 to spring 2016, where I was taking classes for First Communion. I remember one time I would me along with some of my First Communion classmates were reenacting. I think they were reenacting both the Last Supper of Jesus as well as the Nativity of Jesus. I also remember at that time, while I was taking First Communion classes, my mother was just standing there praying, doing adoration. That's pretty much it. Eventually, it will get to the point in which I, of course, got my First Communion. Basically, how First Communion goes is you have to do practice. You have to do this practice in which you have to practice by pretending to eat the body of Christ. Whenever you give in the body of Christ, you pretend to eat the bread. And before that, you have to make a donation. You have to make a donation to someone in need. That's basically the part where my parents did the donation thing. That was my parents. And the part in which I did the First Communion, that was on me. Also at that time, I had to dress fancy because this was a holy and sacred ceremony important for the Catholic faith. Also, I remember at that time during First Communion where I think the priest or one of my First Communion teachers would say, you have to eat the whole bread. in one bite. Don't do multiple bites. So when I did first communion, the first time I had communion, I ate, I ate, I ate the body of Christ, and I took several bites. When I did this, a lot of the people were looking at me, and they were like, "Oh, do it, or something like that." They were like, "Oh," they were acting so surprised. I think that was, I really don't know why, but at the end they understood why, because of course it was my first communion, and I was one of the many hundreds of people that did first communion. That was back in April 2016. And then after the first communion, there was this party in which I celebrated the communion with some of my friends, some of them who attended the church, some of them that are not even Catholic, but they were just there to support me. I also remember the time in which during the celebration, my mom would make a cake. My mom would make a Catholic cake, which says something along the lines of, "Congratulations, Gabriel." And that was it. Afterwards, it was now becoming less common for me to go to church, because at that time, even though I still did not understand my faith that well, I really didn't want to go to church. I didn't really like it, because now during mass, I was often falling asleep. I was often falling asleep, especially during the times in which I had to kneel. And I also didn't act appropriately whenever I was given the body of Christ. My parents were mad at me that I didn't like it. It's not in what I've just said. It may look like my parents were forcing me, even though this was not the case. If I were truly being forced to go to church, my parents would be like, "You're gonna go to church, or no computer, no cell phone. You're gonna do it now." That wasn't the case, fortunately. My parents were just there to share their Catholic beliefs on me. Some of which I still retain now, and some of which I have made research on and started to develop my own faith myself. Which of course turns into what I think about the Catholic Church. My parents' ideas, along with what my church thinks, along with research, forming my faith. I don't know if I'm right saying this. Also, I remember during First Communion, almost every single week we would go to Flippers. And then after that, go to a race car, go to a car race arena and practice racing over there. Then came quarantine. Then I stopped going to church altogether. And at that time, that was the lowest point, the nadir of my faith, the lowest point in my faith. I didn't like going to church. I didn't practice well my faith. That was the lowest point of my faith. It wasn't until I met this friend who was devoutly Catholic, whom I'm not going to name in order to protect their identity. They shared the ideas about what they think about God to me, what they think about Jesus, as well as what they think about their Catholic faith. And this is what got me back into my Catholic faith. From my friend is when I began to truly understand my faith. And after reading most of the Bible, this is where I would truly understand the true meaning of my faith. And it was after 2022 in which I started to finally go to church more often now. When I started to understand the true meaning of going to church, the true meaning of praying, the true meaning of what the Bible is, at least the basics of it. Because most of the time, because most of my knowledge beforehand came from several of the times in which my English teachers made me read the fables of Adam and Eve, and how Eve ate the apples and got cancelled for it, thus leading to sin. That was the only thing I understood before 2022. And I have to say, I think I did poorly deciphering what does this story mean, and the likes of that. Otherwise, and anywho, afterwards, after I finally started to understand my faith, my mom would enroll me in confirmation classes, and this is when I start to finally form my own beliefs on what I think about God, what I think about Jesus, as well as what I think about the church overall. It was through confirmation classes in which I finally start to express my ideas towards other people. And it was also at that time in which I get to talk about my faith to my priest, my confirmation classmates, and my confirmation teachers, catechists. This is the time in which I truly enjoyed going to church. This was the time in which I truly enjoyed learning fully about Jesus, learning about my faith, learning about the church itself. And throughout the last half of the confirmation classes, this is, as you can see through my videos, this is when I began to fully explore ideas, express my opinions through my videos of my faith. As you may have noticed, I made some few opinion and essay related videos regarding my faith. And then came the confirmation retreat, which I have also made a video on. But to briefly summarize it, I stayed 3 days, 2 nights away from my parents, where I engaged in activities which talk about my faith, the meaning of life, the purpose of the church, as well as the Bible overall. This is where I get to engage in activities that symbolize the whole point of the church, as well as faith, temptations, and whatnot, as well as adoration. My God, those mosquitoes won't stop annoying me. I'm glad I got one before it bit me. But anyways, after my confirmation retreat came confirmation, and this is where I felt, and this was for me the absolute pinnacle of my faith, the absolute pinnacle of my happiness towards the church. For me to do confirmation, I tried my hardest to convince my devoutly Catholic friend to be my sponsor, as well as me trying my best to convince one of my uncles and aunts to come attend the church I was attending. I even went as far as attending my Muslim friend, my friend who's Muslim, there to support me as well. Funny part is my Muslim friend didn't really dress fancy because he forgot to dress fancy. But I did, as well as my sponsor. And this was the night of my life. This is where I get to finally meet the bishop, the bishop, the bishop for this Catholic district, Bishop John Richard Noonan. Actually, no, John Gerard Noonan, who's the current bishop of this archdiocese of Orlando, Florida. He's an Irish American. I know he speaks English. He also speaks some Spanish. But that's not what we're here to talk about. What I'm here to talk about is my confirmation. Basically, what happened in confirmation is it was the way seating works is at the back of the back seats of the church was sponsor confirmandi in that order. In the front and at the front of the church was where the family members were sitting. I was separate from both my dad and my aunt. And where the people were standing were the uncles and aunts that were required to attend for me, the church, as well as other family members too and friends that were also standing. There was like over 150 people being confirmed and over 150 sponsors, which was one of the highest number of people I've ever seen in the church, in my church, the Holy Cross Church. After I got confirmed, after they put holy oil on me, I had to wash my face, and then afterwards, I would redirect my friends to my home, in which we basically celebrated confirmation. We had lasagna for dinner as well as cake to commemorate my confirmation. I even had letters sent through my uncles and aunts, my father, my mother, and my Catholic friend, giving me the best of luck for my confirmation. Now, even though confirmation for some people it may look like your journey to your Catholic faith is over, it is not. There are some people that continue to serve the church by doing peer ministry, or even like earlier, becoming a priest, bishop, go as far as the Pope, those kind of things. There's even some like me who for around 1.5 years volunteered for By the Fruits Foundation, in which I gave people in need from the countries of Mexico, Venezuela, Colombia, and the Dominican Republic basic food, lentils, rice, and salt for the people in need. I didn't really like doing that kind of community service, but my mother did. And now I understand why I did those community service. And even though I've done community service, I forgot to mark the hours for my counselor to put in. But that's okay. I'm no longer in school. Now, even though I still enjoy practicing my Catholic faith, unfortunately, I haven't had the time to go to church because, number one, I'm still trying to look for work, and number two, both of my parents are already working as I speak. So therefore, I don't have I don't have the time to go to church. And also because I'm already confirmed, there's not really much I can do. And also because I don't want to do peer ministry, because there's other things I want to focus on in my life. So basically that's it. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed what I think about my Catholic faith. I hope you enjoyed listening to my opinion, my history of my Catholic faith. And anyways, that's all I have to say here. So therefore, finally, goodbye for now.